How's it going, my bakers? Hope you're having a great day so far. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'll show you how to make a 100% whole wheat sandwich bread. So let's go to the kitchen and get started. We have made this loaf before. The dough was extremely sticky and messy. The process involved resting and plenty of kneading. The bread was great in the end, and a lot of you enjoyed it, but it took quite an inelegant method to produce. We will solve the problems of the previous recipe by using the cold fermentation and no-knead methods. And the result here is pretty much the same. We have a very soft, springy and flavorful whole wheat loaf. Thanks to the scalding method, it'll stay soft for days. It is the perfect alternative for your soft white sandwich loaf. And if you don't want to cold ferment this dough, simply leave it to ferment at room temperature. You can easily bake this on the same day if you want. I'll leave that decision up to you. Okay, so with the intro out of the way, let's see what it takes to make this bread. We'll need some whole wheat bread flour, which is nice and nutritious and very tasty. We'll need some yeast, salt, butter, an egg yolk, some type of sweet syrup. I'm using barley malt syrup. We'll also need some water, and we'll use the leftover egg white for glazing. And I'll tell you about some alternative ingredients later. Let's see what equipment we'll need. We'll need a bowl, scales, a dough scraper, a temperature probe, a brush for glazing, and a whisk for making the scald. It is not essential, but it does make the job a lot easier. And last but not least, we'll need a loaf tin for baking this loaf. I'll be using my USA Pan Pullman tin. It has served me really well so far. It is the best tin I've owned as of yet. It measures at around 9.5 inches or 24 centimeters long and about 4.5 inches, 11 centimeters wide. And the depth is pretty much the same as the width. And if you're interested, you can find this tin in my Amazon shop link below. Okay, let's make this dough. And the first step is to make the scald. It'll contain part of the flour, all of the salt, the butter, the syrup, and all of the water. And of course the water should be boiling hot. It is the scald that makes this bread extra soft and springy. The boiling water will gelatinize the starch of the flour, resulting in a nice bouncy texture. It'll prevent the loaf from drying out too soon and staling too. You can find a full detailed video about the scalding method in the Principles of Baking playlist. I would highly suggest you watch that video. Okay, after you've mixed the scald, cover it up and leave it to cool down completely. My kitchen is around 24 degrees Celsius or 75 degrees Fahrenheit. That is almost the same as the final dough temperature that we're aiming for. I left my scald out on the table. It will take around 3 hours to cool down. If you don't want to wait that long, you can just use half the water of the recipe in the scald, reserve the other half for temperature control, leave the scald to sit for around 1 hour, then use cooler water to reduce the temperature of the scald so you can move on with making your dough. Here I was checking it after 2 hours and it had not cooled down enough yet. So I covered it up and left it for another hour or so. And funny enough, even after an additional hour, it had not cooled down sufficiently. But I was impatient, so I just moved on with making the dough. It will turn out by about 1 degree warmer than I wanted to, but that is no big deal because we're cold fermenting. I'll simply shorten the folding intervals. Okay, once you're happy with the temperature of the scald, add the yeast and the egg yolk. Give it all good whisking again. Finally, add the remaining flour, grab your dough scraper and mix it to a dough. As for alternative ingredients, you could swap the butter for oil if you wanted to. You could replace the egg yolk with another 15 to 20 grams of butter. You can swap the barley malt syrup for honey, maple syrup, or any sweet syrup you like. Or don't use any sweetening. I do like a bit of sweetness in my soft sandwich loaf. Okay, once your dough is fully mixed, pop it in a clean bowl and take its temperature. Ideally, you want this to be around 25 degrees Celsius or 77 Fahrenheit. Mine's a little bit warmer, so I'm just shortening the folding intervals. I'll pop my dough in the fridge for 15 minutes before taking it out and giving it the first fold. If your dough is cooler, extend the folding interval to 30 minutes, 45 minutes. To be honest, it's not that important. It's gonna cool down anyway. This dough can be a little bit sticky, so dust it with flour before you take it out of the bowl. And to fold it, simply place it on the table with the smooth side down, flatten it out, fold the edge over the middle, going around in a circle until you reach the point where you started. Then flip it smooth side up again, tighten it against the table, place it back into the bowl, then pop it back into the fridge for another 15 minutes of chilling. The second fold works exactly the same as the first one. We are giving this dough 2 folds just to get some good gluten development. After the second fold, I decided to check the temperature just to see how it's changed. After 30 minutes in the fridge, it's dropped down by about 3 degrees Celsius. Okay, the dough can go back into the fridge for a long cold ferment. 12 to 24 hours, it's up to you, but 24 hours is going to make a tastier loaf for sure. I fermented mine for 24 hours, and it has puffed up beautifully. It's full of gas and it's ready to be made into a loaf. I decided to make a segmented loaf like I did in my previous recipe. That design is purely for looks, it serves no other purpose. And if you just want to make a standard one-piece loaf, you could just do the final shaping right now. But if you are going to recreate what I'm making on screen right now, then weigh your dough and divide it into 4 equal pieces. After dividing, we need to pre-shape these pieces. We'll shape them in little cylinders. Pre-shaping will ensure that all the pieces are nice and uniform in the end. After dividing the disc of dough into 4, we are left with 4 rough triangles. So the best way to pre-shape them is by folding the 2 corners in and rolling the dough up. You don't have to pre-shape them very tightly. Once you're done, cover the dough up and leave it to rest for 30 minutes. During this time the dough will warm up, it will relax, and it will make final shaping a lot easier. Before we do the final shaping though, let's prep the tin. Rub it with butter or brush it with some oil. This will not only prevent the loaf from sticking, but also toast the crust for a nice color and texture. Final shaping is pretty straightforward. Dust the dough lightly with flour, place the piece of dough with the smooth side down vertically in front of you. Flatten it out and then simply roll it up starting from the top. And this time you can roll it a little bit tighter than you did during the pre-shaping. When it comes to the ends, you can leave them like this to get nice little swirls on the loaf. Or you can do what I'll do in a minute and fold them in so the sides are nice and smooth. I do always like to pinch the seam together at the bottom. Nothing's gonna happen if you don't, it's just a habit that I have. And here's what I mean by tidying up the ends. All I'm doing is simply folding the dough down. And again, this is up to you if you do it or not. If you like the little swirls on the sides of your loaf, leave them. I'm just giving you options. Once your little loaf segments are shaped up, place them nice and neat in the tin. And once they're all in there, press them down lightly to make sure they all spread out evenly. And that is the loaf ready for final proofing. It will take around 1.5 to 2 hours. Remember, if you skip the pre-shaping step and shape the dough into one loaf straight away, then you must add at least another half an hour to the final proof. During the final hour of fermentation, preheat the oven, 160 degrees Celsius, 320 Fahrenheit, fan on. If your oven doesn't have a fan, increase the temperature by 10%. This is how your loaf should look once it's done proofing. It should be nice and puffy. If yours is taking longer, leave it for longer. Okay, apply the egg white glaze and pop this bad boy in the oven. It'll take around 45 minutes initially. After that, we'll take it out and bake it for another 5 minutes to ensure that the crust is well baked on the sides and on the bottom. Here's a little trick for making the crust extra soft. This is optional, you don't have to do this, but it works really well. Spray the loaf with water on all sides, and you want to completely soak it, so don't be shy with the water. Okay, let's pop this thing back into the oven for another 5 minutes to finish baking. You may have noticed that there are some pale spots on the surface of the loaf, and that is because I didn't whisk the egg white properly. So make sure your egg white is nice and watery before you brush it on. But here's a little trick I'm going to use to fix that. Plus, it will make the loaf shinier and make the crust even softer. All it is a light coating of oil. And speaking of glazing, you can glaze this loaf with whatever you like. If you don't know any other glazes, then I have the right video for you. You can find it in the Principles of Baking playlist. It is a video in which I compare 15 different glazes most commonly used in bread making. But that is all I have to say about this recipe. It's simple, it's customizable, and the result is great. Here's the loaf after a couple of days. It is still nice, soft and springy, and here you see it after around 6 days. It has dried out a bit, but it's still soft. And if you haven't finished the loaf in 6 days, then you should be making smaller loaves, because no matter which methods you use, your bread will always be best on the first day. Unless it's rye bread, that just gets better with age. So what do you think of this recipe? And have you tried the other version I made earlier? Let me know down in the comments. You want to see more videos like this one? Click over here. Subscribe to the channel, click right here. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.